The massive trading station floated in space like a glowing jewel. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went through its docking bays. Inside the main hall, hundreds of alien beings bought and sold goods from across the galaxy. Hyun-soo wiped sweat from his brow as he counted the credits on his data pad. The young human trader had been working the outer rim routes for 3 months now, and business was finally picking up. His small cargo ship carried rare metals from the abandoned mining worlds, and alien collectors paid good money for them. "Excuse me, are you the human trader?" Hyun-soo looked up to see a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms approaching his booth. The creature wore expensive robes and had the confident air of someone with serious money to spend. "Yes, that's me. Hyun-soo Park, independent merchant. What can I do for you?" The alien's large black eyes studied the metal samples on display. "Impressive quality. I represent a consortium of collectors on Altara Prime. We're interested in establishing a regular supply contract." "That sounds great," Hyun-soo said, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice. This could be the break he'd been hoping for. "I can guarantee monthly shipments of whatever quantities you need." "Excellent. Now about the shipping routes." The alien pulled out a star chart and spread it across the booth's counter. "We've calculated the most efficient path from your territory to our worlds. If you launch from coordinates 158.67 by 244.12, you can cut 3 days off each journey." Hyun-soo glanced at the coordinates and frowned. Those numbers put the starting point way outside human space. "Our main shipping hub is at coordinates 247.89 by 156.34. That's where all our processing facilities are located." The moment those numbers left his mouth, every conversation within 50 meters stopped dead. The bustling sounds of the marketplace faded to an eerie silence. Aliens of every shape and size turned to stare at him with expressions of pure terror. A small, reptilian creature at the next booth dropped an armload of crystal figurines. They shattered on the floor with tiny musical sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. The blue-skinned alien took several rapid steps backward, his 4 arms raised as if to ward off some invisible threat. You're from there? From the coordinates that cannot be spoken." "I don't understand," Hyun-soo said, looking around at all the frightened faces. "It's just a shipping hub. We process or manufactured goods there. Nothing special about it." An ancient-looking creature with gray fur and wise, tired eyes approached slowly. Its species was unknown to Hyun-soo, but the way other aliens moved aside showed it commanded great respect. "Young one," the creature said in a voice like whispered wind, "do you truly not know what your people did 50 cycles ago?" "Did? We're just traders and miners. We keep to ourselves mostly." Hyun-soo felt confusion growing into worry. "What are you talking about?" The old alien exchanged glances with others nearby. Several beings had started backing away, as if Hyun-soo might explode at any moment. "Tell me, human," the creature continued, "when your people faced the Great Conquest, how did they respond? The Hegemony War? That was before my time, but everyone knows the story. The Hegemony tried to invade our worlds, so we fought back and drove them off." Hyun-soo shrugged. "Standard territorial defense. Nothing unusual about it." A sound like a strangled gasp came from the crowd. The blue-skinned buyer had gone completely pale, his dark skin now almost white with fear. "Drove them off." The old alien's voice became even quieter. "Child, your people didn't drive anyone off. You did something far more terrible." "More terrible than fighting invaders?" "You turned victory meaningless," said a new voice. A heavily armored warrior from one of the military species stepped forward. Even through his battlesuit's helmet, Hyun-soo could see genuine fear in his eyes. "Your people proved that some enemies cannot be defeated because they refuse to let victory exist." The confusion was becoming frustration now. "I don't understand any of this. We won the war. The hegemony retreated and left us alone. Everyone got what they wanted." "Won?" The old alien made a sound that might have been bitter laughter. "Young traitor, your people didn't win that war. You made it impossible to lose." More aliens had gathered now, keeping their distance but listening with the horrified fascination of beings hearing ghost stories. Several were recording the conversation on various devices. When faced with conquest, the old creature continued, "Most species surrender, fight conventional battles, or seek allies. Your people chose a 4th option that no one had ever imagined." "Which was?" The ancient alien's eyes held depths of memory that made Hyun-soo uncomfortable. "You chose to make victory cost everything. You taught the galaxy that some wars have no winners, only different kinds of losers." The warrior stepped closer, his armor systems humming with nervous energy. Every military academy in known space now studies what your people did. Not to copy it, but to avoid ever facing an enemy like that again. Hyun-Soo looked around at all the fearful, respectful faces. These were hardened traders, warriors, and diplomats from dozens of worlds. Some had probably lived through multiple wars and seen terrible things. Yet they all looked at him like he was carrying some kind of invisible weapon. "All I know," he said slowly, "is that we're free and independent. Isn't that what every species wants?" The old alien nodded gravely. "Yes, young one. That's exactly what makes you so terrifying." Dr. So-Young Lee descended through the security levels of the Galactic Archive like a person diving into dark water. Each floor required new clearances, biological scans, and approval codes. By the time she reached sublevel 12, the walls had changed from polished metal to rough stone, and the air felt heavy with secrets. Her research assignment had seemed simple enough. The Historical Review Board wanted a complete report on the Hegemony War for their upcoming anniversary documentation. Standard procedure, routine work. She had expected to spend a few days reviewing battle reports and diplomatic records. That was before she discovered the classification codes. Files marked with warning symbols she had never seen in 15 years as a galactic historian. Documents that required authorization from 3 different species governments just to access. Records sealed with encryption so advanced that her computer needed 6 hours just to decode the first page. So-Young settled into the cramped reading chamber and opened the first file. The header made her pause. Operation Golden Harvest, Complete Subjugation Protocol, Species Classification, Primitive/Non-Threatening. The Hegemony's initial surveys of human space painted a picture of remarkable primitiveness. Radio communications. Chemical rockets. Nuclear weapons that seemed impressive to the humans but were barely more advanced than throwing rocks by galactic standards. 12 star systems containing roughly 15 billion beings who had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. The invasion plan had been elegant in its simplicity. 1 battle fleet. Standard occupation protocols. Expected resistance duration, less than 1 standard month. The humans would be given the usual choice: surrender and accept integration into hegemony society, or face complete military defeat and forced integration. So-Young turned to the battle reports, expecting to read about a quick, efficient conquest. Instead, she found something that made her hands shake. The first attack targeted the human homeworld, a planet called Earth. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts and their escort fleets dropped out of hyperspace expecting to face primitive defenses. The planet's military responded with nuclear missiles and energy weapons that barely scratched the attackers' shields. Then something unprecedented happened. Instead of surrendering when defeat became obvious, the humans activated some kind of device that destabilized their own sun. The star began to collapse and expand in a pattern that would destroy everything in the system within hours. The hegemony fleet tried to retreat, but the humans had somehow calculated the exact timing. As the enemy ships attempted to jump to hyperspace, the solar disruption created an energy field that trapped them in the system. Every ship was destroyed when the star exploded. So-Young read the paragraph 3 times before the meaning sank in. The humans had deliberately destroyed their own homeworld to kill a few thousand enemy soldiers. 8 billion people had chosen death rather than surrender. But that was only the beginning. The second attack targeted a human mining colony on a planet called New Sol. When hegemony forces landed, expecting to find a demoralized population ready to surrender after hearing about Earth's fate, they instead found empty cities and industrial facilities running on automatic. The colonists had moved underground. Not to hide but to prepare. As hegemony troops searched the abandoned settlements, seismic charges planted throughout the planet's crust detonated simultaneously. The entire world cracked apart like an egg. The mining explosives that the humans used for their work had been turned into a planet-killing weapon. 3,000 human colonists and 15,000 hegemony soldiers died in minutes. So-Young's breathing became shallow as she read report after report of the same pattern. Colony after colony chose complete annihilation rather than surrender. Some used industrial accidents that killed everyone on the planet. Others redirected asteroids into their own worlds while enemy troops were landing. One settlement had somehow caused their gas giant to ignite, creating a new star that sterilized 3 neighboring systems. The war lasted 18 standard months. The hegemony won every battle. They occupied every target. But each victory cost them more ships and soldiers than they could afford to lose, and left them holding nothing but empty radioactive ruins. The final report came from Admiral Kextal himself, the commander who had planned the entire operation. His words were written in the formal style required for military documents, but So Young could sense the horror between the lines. Recommend immediate cessation of all hostilities with human species. Enemy demonstrates combat doctrine incompatible with standard conquest protocols. Victory achieved at cost of 67% fleet strength and 89% ground forces. All occupied territories rendered uninhabitable by enemy action. No captured resources. No surviving population for integration. Strategic objective of adding productive systems to hegemony territory completely failed. The final paragraph made So Young's skin crawl. Enemy survivors estimated at fewer than 50 million scattered across hidden installations and generation ships. However, recommend treating this species as permanently hostile and extremely dangerous. They have demonstrated willingness to weaponize their own extinction. Conventional military doctrine assumes enemy desires survival. This assumption proves false regarding humans. They appear to consider mutual annihilation an acceptable victory condition. So Young closed the files and sat in the dark chamber for a long time. Now she understood why the traders at Nexus Station reacted with such terror to simple coordinates. The humans hadn't been defeated 50 years ago. They had taught the galaxy that some enemies were too dangerous to fight, not because they were strong, but because they refused to lose in any recognizable way. The hegemony had won the war. But they had learned never to start another one. The emergency alarms on Nexus Station had been screaming for 6 hours straight. Commander Velkash stood in the nearly empty control center, watching his staff abandon their posts one by one as the evacuation ships departed. Soon, only a skeleton crew of 12 beings remained on a station designed to house 50,000. "Sir," his communications officer called out, her voice tight with fear. "The unknown vessel is requesting docking permission. They're transmitting standard diplomatic codes." Velkash studied the approaching ship on his main screen. It was sleek and small, clearly built for peace rather than war. But the energy readings were completely unfamiliar, unlike anything in the galactic ship databases. "This is Commander Velkash of Nexus Station. Identify your vessel and state your intentions." The response came in perfect galactic standard, spoken with a calm, pleasant accent. "Commander, this is Ambassador Jaemin Kim of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. We request permission to dock and establish formal diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council." The words hit Velkash like a physical blow. Terran. Human. After 50 years of silence, they had finally emerged from their forbidden territory. "Ambassador," Velkash managed to say, his voice barely steady, "are you aware that your approach has triggered evacuation protocols across this entire sector?" There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Commander. We weren't aware our visit would cause such concern. We sent advance notification through the proper diplomatic channels 3 months ago." Velkash checked his records and found the message buried in routine diplomatic correspondence. It had been filed under trade mission requests, and completely ignored. Nobody had imagined that humans would ever attempt normal diplomatic contact. "Permission granted for docking Bay 7, Velkash said finally. "Please proceed slowly and keep your weapons powered down." "Commander, we're not carrying any weapons. This is purely a diplomatic mission." 20 minutes later, Velkash stood in docking Bay 7 with the few brave volunteers who had remained on station. The human ship settled onto the landing platform with barely a whisper of engines. It was beautiful in its simplicity, all smooth curves and elegant lines. The airlock opened and 3 humans emerged. Ambassador Kim was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair. He wore simple but elegant clothing that looked more like business attire than military uniforms. His 2 companions, Dr. Eunji Park and Consul Minho Lee, looked equally peaceful and professional. "Commander Velkash?" Ambassador Kim approached with an extended hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for accommodating our visit on such short notice." Velkash stared at the offered hand for several seconds before carefully extending his own appendage. The human's grip was firm but gentle, completely unthreatening. "Ambassador, I must ask, are you aware of the reputation your species has developed throughout the galaxy?" Kim's expression grew puzzled. "Reputation? I'm afraid I don't understand. We've had no contact with other species for 50 years. We assumed relations were simply quiet due to the distance between our territories." Dr. Park stepped forward, her data pad displaying stellar charts. "Commander, according to our records, the hegemony war ended with a mutual ceasefire and withdrawal agreement. We've been respecting that treaty ever since, focusing on internal development and peaceful exploration. Velkash felt his breathing apparatus struggle to process this information. Peaceful exploration? Ambassador, your people are considered the most dangerous military force in galactic history. Dangerous? Consul Lee looked genuinely shocked. Commander, we haven't built a military vessel in 45 years. Our entire space force consists of exploration ships and trading vessels. But the war, what you did to your own worlds. Ambassador Kim's expression grew sad and tired. Commander, we were facing complete genocide. Every human settlement, every ship, every man, woman, and child was marked for destruction or slavery. We did what any species would do when facing extinction. Any species would surrender. Would they? Dr. Park activated a holographic display showing historical data. Commander, we've studied the records of over 300 species that faced similar invasions. 87% chose surrender and integration. 12% fought conventional resistance wars. Less than 1% chose complete resistance. Complete resistance meaning? Ambassador Kim's voice became very quiet. Meaning we decided that if we couldn't live free we wouldn't live at all. Every world that fell chose to deny the enemy any benefit from conquest. We turned victory into a meaningless concept. Velkash began to understand the scope of the misunderstanding. Ambassador, the galaxy believes your actions were military strategy. Calculated doctrine designed to make conquest impossible. They weren't strategy, Kim said simply. They were desperation. We had no plan, no doctrine, no grand strategy. We just refused to let our children grow up as slaves. The conversation continued for hours. Slowly the terrible truth became clear. The humans genuinely didn't understand why they were feared. From their perspective, they had simply defended themselves against aggressors and then returned to peaceful development. They had no idea that their desperate last stands had been interpreted as casual displays of unthinkable military capability. So you see, Commander, Ambassador Kim concluded, we're not here as conquerors or threats. We're here as neighbors who want to establish normal diplomatic and trade relationships. We have technologies and resources that could benefit everyone, and we're eager to learn from other species' knowledge and culture. Velkash looked at these three peaceful, reasonable beings and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. The humans weren't monsters. They weren't strategic geniuses. They were ordinary people who had proven they would rather die than submit. Somehow, that made them infinitely more terrifying. The Grand Assembly Chamber had not seen this many species gathered in one place for over 300 years. Representatives from 600 worlds filled the massive amphitheater, their varied forms creating a living mosaic of galactic civilization. But despite the impressive attendance, the mood was tense with barely controlled fear. Ambassador Jaemin Kim stood at the center of the chamber, looking remarkably calm for someone surrounded by the combined military and political power of known space. His aide, Dr. Sung-hee Choi, checked her translation equipment one final time as thousands of alien eyes focused on them. Honored delegates, Kim began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. We come before you not as enemies or conquerors, but as neighbors seeking understanding. It has come to our attention that our actions during the hegemony conflict 50 years ago have been misinterpreted. A ripple of nervous movement passed through the assembly. Fleet Admiral Zekthos rose from the hegemony delegation, his four eyes blazing with remembered trauma. Misinterpreted. His voice boomed across the chamber. Your people turned warfare into mutual annihilation. You made victory meaningless by destroying everything worth conquering. Kim nodded respectfully. Admiral, I understand your perspective. But from our viewpoint, we were simply ensuring that slavery would cost more than any rational being would be willing to pay. Dr. Choi activated a holographic display showing detailed records of human colonies during the war. Honored delegates, every action taken by our people was purely defensive. We never attacked hegemony worlds. We never sought to conquer territory. We simply made it clear that occupying human space would result in gaining nothing but empty radioactive systems. Chancellor Vixenale of the Altaran Republic leaned forward in her seat. But Ambassador, the implications of your methods. If every species adopted such tactics, warfare would become impossible. Kim's expression grew thoughtful. Chancellor, perhaps that wouldn't be such a terrible thing. The chamber fell silent as the weight of his words settled over the assembly. Defense Minister Kroktor of the warrior clans stood up, his massive frame bristling with barely contained aggression. You speak of making war impossible as if it's desirable. Conflict drives evolution. The strong must lead, the weak must follow. This is the natural order. Is it? Kim asked quietly. Minister, in the 50 years since our conflict with the hegemony, how many major wars has the galaxy seen? Kroktor paused, confusion flickering across his scarred features. There have been border disputes, trade conflicts. But no wars of conquest, Dr. Choi interjected, highlighting statistics on her display. No species has attempted to subjugate another since the hegemony war ended. Military budgets across the galaxy have decreased by an average of 40%. Resources that once went to building warships now fund exploration, research, and development. Trade Master Hexval from the Merchant Guild spoke up. Are you suggesting that your people's methods have somehow created peace? Kim shook his head. Not created, Trade Master. Simply made the cost of war too high for any sane leader to contemplate. We didn't set out to change galactic politics. We just refused to be enslaved. Admiral Morketh of the Combined Fleet stood slowly. Ambassador, our military strategists have run thousands of simulations. Every projection reaches the same conclusion: there is no acceptable victory against an enemy willing to sacrifice everything. Then perhaps, Kim said gently, the solution is not to have enemies. The ancient philosopher Kathera, representing the Wisdom Keepers, spoke in a voice like whispered wind. Young human, your words suggest that your people have transcended the traditional concepts of victory and defeat. Not transcended, Kim replied. We simply redefined them. Victory became staying free. Defeat became slavery. Everything else was just details. Dr. Choi brought up new displays showing current human territory. Delegates, observe that human space today consists of exactly 12 star systems, the same number we held 50 years ago. We have not expanded our territory by a single planet. We seek no empire, no dominion over others. We want only to exist as free beings among other free beings. The hegemony's chief strategist, General Vexanael, raised a tentacle. But how can we trust that your people will maintain this peaceful stance? Your capability for extreme measures remains unchanged. Kim was quiet for a long moment before responding. General, that's exactly why you can trust us. We've proven that we value freedom more than life itself. A free people living among other free peoples has no reason for extreme measures. The debate continued for hours. Gradually, a new understanding began to emerge. The humans hadn't become galactic boogeymen through malice or strategic planning. They had simply demonstrated that some principles were worth any sacrifice to defend. When the final vote was called, the result was unanimous. The Terran Autonomous Zone would be recognized as sovereign territory with absolute non-interference guarantees. More importantly, the Grand Assembly adopted the Freedom Principle, a formal recognition that any species' right to self-determination was absolute and non-negotiable. As the human delegation prepared to depart, Kim addressed the assembly one final time. Honored delegates, we never wanted to be feared. We simply refused to be slaves. Now, perhaps, we can work together as equals to build something better than either of our species could achieve alone. The ship departed, leaving behind a galaxy that had learned a fundamental truth. Sometimes the greatest strength came not from the ability to conquer others, but from the refusal to be conquered. Peace had arrived not through superior wisdom or advanced diplomacy, but through the simple, terrifying knowledge that some prices were too high for anyone to pay. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was truly at peace.